Good afternoon, everyone. As I mentioned, welcome to Stratify, the official podcast of IMA MSN UP. I am Shashwat Sanket on behalf of the IMA MSN UP team, and I will be hosting today's episode. With us, we have Dr. Rajneesh Raj sir, the President IMA MSN UP, Dr. Rahul Anand sir, the General Secretary IMA MSN UP, and the entire team of Stratify. I would also like to mention Harsh Srivastav, Harshit Chauhan, Shashwat Singh, without whom this event would not have been possible. So now it's time for us to welcome our guest. It's time for us to introduce our special guest for the event today. Please welcome Professor Dr. Arun Kumar Singh sir. Dr. Arun sir is the first Vice Chancellor of the newly formed Common State University of Uttar Pradesh, that is Atal Bihari Vajpayee University, which will be giving affiliation to all the medical, dental, paramedical and nursing colleges in the state of Uttar Pradesh. Dr. Arun sir has served as the head of department of plastic surgery in KGMU Lucknow. He is the immediate past president of National Academy of Burns. Sir has also served as the past president of IMA Lucknow. Sir is the chairman of Scientific Program Committee, Constitution Committee and Award Committee of IMA Lucknow. Apart from this, Sir also has numerous journals and publications to his name at both international and national level. Firstly, on behalf of the IMA MSN UP team, I would like to congratulate you, sir, for becoming the first ever Vice Chancellor of Atal Bihari Vajpayee University, and we are very pleased to have you with us. Thank you so much for taking out some time from your busy schedule and accepting our request for this talk show. So now let's begin with the episode, sir.
Shashwat, for the
Sure. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Shashwat, for this introduction. That feeling of being the Vice Chancellor has still not gone into my head. I still feel, I'm still part of my KGMU and working there. Nothing like, but yes, I do realize that an onerous responsibility has been entrusted on me, and I should start working for it and start earnestly working for it. Well, friends, I'm very happy to know a couple of things. Number one is that I may, let me call it as the students wing or medical students network is very active and doing such a work. I'm very happy and pleased to know that, and doing some constructive work. That's very important. And because when I was also in IMA, we did try to have some student enrollment into that, but I think we lacked the energy, the enthusiasm at that point of time, so we couldn't take it further. So beyond discussions, beyond council meetings, we were not very earnest about it. But I'm happy to see it grow and participating in a very useful way. I have been president of IMA Lucknow, so I'm very happy to be associated with it. I didn't pursue higher in IMA because that would have entailed, curtailing my clinical and academic work. So I remained at the level of the Indian Medical Association at Lucknow level and working for it. The other thing is that I have been the controller of examinations for KG Medical University and its affiliated medical and nursing colleges. So that has also given me some insight into medical education and the examination system. And maybe that was one of the reasons why the government entrusted me with this responsibility, because I have been conducting exams, DM, MCH and MDMS entrance exams right from 2008 until unless this NEET came into being, and also entrance and exit exams for KG Medical University ever since 2011 when I took over as the charge of the control of examination. So with that background, I think that was one of the points in favor why the government thought somebody who's already dealing with exams, and the primary purpose of university is to have a good standard of exams, and that is why they might have chosen me. Let me, before I take any further, let me delve a little bit into my own development rather than, that would give you a sort of an impression about the medical education system right now. Well, I would call myself a medical graduate trained from the old years, I would call it, And because of that, we had a period of MBBS, as you know it, and a period of internship. What I want to specifically comment about internship was that that internship which we did was a very productive internship. Very productive internship. Yeah. Okay. So coming back to it, the internship was a phase which was a phase of relaxation for medical students. It was a phase where medical students learned practicals which they had seen and observed during the program of those 4.5 years. I too learned a lot, how to put a drip, how to do a bandage, how to produce a Colles fracture, how to do a DNC, how to, lots and lots of things. Plus, in this spare time of internship, myself and one of my colleague, my friend, used to go into the tetanus ward. It was a ward which was very much neglected. Nobody, with a very high mortality, tetanus was rife at that point of time. Nobody looking after that. All patients virtually doomed to death. We enjoyed working for those people, and we have saved people. Even I still recollect, small children with 25 cardiac arrests. We have been able to save them because our instructions was to the staff: wherever you find something, just call us. We were just next door. So in the spin-off, we got a lot of hand experience. We did at that time, these intra-cats and all not available, Vigos were not available. So we used to do cut downs. So one cut down after other cut down after other, going up to the cephalic vein, the jugular veins. Seniors from other departments used to come. Arun, when you are doing a neck cut down, please call me. I would like to have a cut down on a jugular. I have not done any. So that gave us a lot of impetus, a lot of work and lock and breath. The other benefit which came to us was during this leisurely period of internship where you did things which you liked to do, was that we published our first paper. In fact, sent our first paper on tetanus, intrathecal ATS in tetanus neonatorum on the last day of an internship. We learned a lot of medicine because we thought if you have to learn medicine, you have to learn medicine. If you have to go to a surgical site, then this is the last chance for you to learn medicine. So we learned a lot of practical medicine also. Not only that, after doing my intermediate, I went into medical college. Never got an opportunity to go into the university. So I thought, why not join the university? So we joined the university in French language. We did a diploma and high school and intermediate in French language. What I mean to say is internship was a period of relaxation, of enjoyment and practical learning, which unfortunately the present medical curriculum has ruined it. And who's responsible? I blamely square the medical doctors for spoiling it, because nobody else has made our curriculum as far as the things are concerned. It is we. Now what happens? I don't blame the young students running during internship or even more before internship, right from second year to coaching classes, because they see their future into it. How can they be spending time doing a dressing which they find is not going to help them in their PG curriculum or PG examination? See the other aspect of it. The other aspect of it is somebody who has been striving hard, working hard, learning hard, solving MCQs, and if it doesn't get selected into the postgraduate course, what happens? He opens a shop or goes into a practice or goes into a government system. But how well is he trained? He's not well trained. He has never perhaps put in an IV drip. He has never given an intramuscular injection. He has never done dressings. He has never put in a Ryle's tube or a catheter. So we are producing some half-baked doctors as far as that is concerned. So I think with that preamble, I think the Medical Council of India has realized it and is changing the pattern of teaching. There are some problems associated with it. And those problems, of course, basically is the lot of medical colleges which are coming up, and these medical colleges are welcome. We need a lot of doctors, but at the same time, we need a good relationship between the ratio of the doctors versus the students, the faculty and the students. So that is one thing which is there. I think that is the preamble. Coming on to this university a little bit. This, as you have rightly pointed out, this university got its approval in 2018. The foundation stone was laid on 25th of December 2019, and I joined about a week back after my appointment here. And it's a grandiose plan in the name of our honorable old former Prime Minister and 5-time MP from Lucknow. Shri Atal Bihari Vajpayee ji. So it's a ambitious project of the government, and I hope till that time we'll be working out of a accommodation or a office provided in the RML Institute, which would again take about a month or two to be furnished and renovated by that time. So till that, I'm working from my Department of Plastic Surgery at KG. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a very inspiring story. And as you mentioned that you still feel that you are a part of KGMU. Well, sir, you will continue to be an integral part of it, and we are very proud to have you with us. There are some very nice points that you mentioned, and we will be dealing with the problems that you mentioned, and we will try to sort out that what solution can be made. And your hard work reflects in your personality, sir. That's why you are a great leader.
Thank you.
So now let's begin with the episode, sir. We have received a lot of questions from students from different medical colleges across UP, and our team has shortlisted a few of those questions of utmost importance, and we will be discussing these questions with you, sir. So
Yeah,
shall we start?
yeah, most welcome.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the first question is the very foundation of today's episode. It says, what are your views regarding medical universities of Uttar Pradesh? Where do they lack? What do they do better than universities of other states? And is there an ideal university in the country to follow its footsteps?
Well, uh, asking me about the medical universities of Uttar Pradesh, I'll once again delve into a little bit into history. About maybe 15 years back, the government did think of having a common medical university in the state of Uttar Pradesh. They, in fact, even created it by the name of Dhanvantari University. And they allotted 2 rooms in one of the buildings in the Rehabilitation and Artificial Limb Center, which is in Daliganj, in part of KGMU. But then somehow that project did not ever take off. So it never happened. So the idea of having a medical university was for quite long time, and it did see the light of day with this government. And I think there is a need for a medical university because the mushrooming of lots of medical colleges, some of them are doing good, some of them are not so, and they need to be helped so that they can improve and do better. As far as the state of medical education in UP is concerned, it's pretty varied. Some institutions are like KGMU. As far as post graduation is concerned, the Sanjay Gandhi University, to a certain extent, I would say the CEFI is also doing good work. So many of the universities, they're independent bodies. They do not have the name. Some of them, like Sanjay Gandhi, does not have a name of a medical university, but yes, it is an independent body. So virtually like an university, but not affiliating others, but yes, giving their own degrees. So some of them, they are doing good work. But some of them, especially these universities which are affiliated with the other colleges like engineering college, nursing colleges, and other sort of colleges, agricultural colleges. So there, the aim and the focus on medical perhaps is not that much, and somehow the attitude perhaps maybe a little not focused toward medical and become a little more casual. So those are the sort of universities which need to be transferred into the coming university, and they need some of them. They need some private colleges are also doing good. It's not that all government colleges are doing good, but some private colleges are also have a reputation in the state, in the country. If you say, I would place many universities which are good, or I wouldn't say there is something like an ideal university, because it's something which is evolving and the changing scenario. But there are good universities which are in the the Amrita is a very good university which is there. The Manipal University is a very good university with lot of credibility and a lot of innovations and good. The MGR University, the Karnataka, Rajasthan, these universities are doing a fairly decent job. And my aim is to perhaps try to extract, when we are forming the rules and regulations, to extract the good things out of these universities and try to mix it with the rules and regulations of the new university which we are going to create.
All right. Thank you, sir. Sir, this leads us to the next question. that why did the establishment of a single university take so long? What were the challenges?
I don't know, because I was not there in the scene, and but I think I mean, if you take it from what I said, 10, 15 years back, that will, I would say, on the part of the government was they had other major priorities, perhaps. So it got into, but with this government, I think medical education has become a priority, and medical health has also taken a priority, and we can see it in this COVID times also that they are in the process. A lot of attention is going towards medical education, bringing up new colleges, getting new teachers and new medical colleges. So I think the focus has shifted, and that has yes, it did take time from its conceivement in 2018 when the act was passed, and then 2019 December. So some time, but I think that is the normal. And but well, whatever has happened has happened. From now onwards, I think we should strive that things go in a much faster pace and more smoother pace.
Definitely, sir. Under your leadership, I definitely believe that medical education will improve in Uttar
I
Pradesh.
hope so.
So moving on to the next one, sir. Well, this is an important one. Even I had this on my mind. When shall we expect the university to become fully functional? Will the current running batches also fall under this university, or will these batches continue with their respective universities?
Let me start from your second question. The current batches means, the new medical colleges which would come up, and there are again, about 20 of them which are in the annual. So those medical colleges from the word go shall be affiliated to this university. That's one. About affiliation of the next colleges, the session is already on. The NEET examination is on 26th of July. That is what has been scheduled. So now, this quick, I think we won't be able to affiliate these universities. So perhaps from the next year, the next academic session, we will be able to include these colleges where the courses are already going on. Till being, what I envisage to do is, and I would try is that this is not really medical, but the nursing colleges may be affiliated this year itself, because their session would be starting something in October or November. So that gives us some about for 5 months time, so that we can join in and we can affiliate them by that time.
All right, thank you, sir. This was something which was asked very frequently to us in the questionnaire.
I know. Everybody would be curious. Yep.
Yes, sir. So hopefully that has been answered now. So moving on to the next one, sir. What were the challenges you anticipate as the Vice Chancellor of Atal Bihari Vajpayee University?
A lot of them. The reason with challenges is, we have to start from a scratch. There's nothing. I often quote, or jestingly or jokingly, though, that I have been appointed the driver, and I have to, look for my train, the engine, the bogies, the platform, the passengers, the guard, and everything. So you have to start from a scratch. But yes, you have to start from somewhere. And what the normal policy of the government is to appoint a higher official, so that he starts planning things according to his wisdom, according to the directions of the government. So I think you have to start somewhere. You can't have everything in one place in one go. As they say, Rome was not built in a day. So you have to start from somewhere, and that is what they have started. As far as curriculum is started, that is why, what I did is, instead of trying to look for a place which is elusive for maybe another couple of months, I said I'll start, and the present Vice Chancellor agreed to it graciously, that I'll start working from my own department, which I had been working, so that you don't lose time onto it. And as far as the full functionality is considered, the building and etc. would take another maybe 2 years. The original, the campus, which is ultimately it will be housed in, will take about 2 to 3 years to come up. But we'll move to the RML Institute 9th floor, and we'll start functioning in a full way, full steam. We don't want to waste time, and we'll do that with everybody's support. I think we will be able to do it, and God willing, of course.
Thank you, sir. As they say, a good beginning is already half done. So this is the start we have got, and hopefully under your leadership, we will achieve great heights. So moving on to the next one, sir. How will modus operandi change in the post-COVID-19 world? How will the exams be conducted? Can online teaching in the medical colleges, particularly the theory part, be a viable option?
Yeah, COVID has lots of problems. You know, these tragedies which happened in history. One thing which I would advocate everybody is that you should look back into the history so that you don't repeat the follies of the past. History gives you a lot of lesson also. In the history, whenever there have been great tragedies, there have been some spin-off benefits also. And like even in the World War II, my own specialty of plastic surgery developed during the World Wars, because lots of injuries came into being, lots of trauma, and lots of booby trap injuries, lots of bomb blasts, all those things come into, and that led to the development of plastic surgery. Similarly, in the COVID, there are going to be some benefits of COVID also. Like this internet teaching has taken a big leap during these COVID times. And similarly, lots of alternative methods have come up. Lot of emphasis is now being given into health education. Lot of emphasis going into promoting health, increasing immunity, promoting health, so that people don't fall sick to that extent. Then sanitation and swachhata, they have been things which I think will stay on in the post-COVID area. Now, coming on to the question of your examinations in particular and teaching, I think this COVID is also not a permanent feature which is going to happen. Ultimately, the COVID is going to go away. It will not going to remain with us forever. Going away means, like we are living with other conditions, like, we have lived with smallpox, we are living with Japanese encephalitis, we are living with HIV, which are living with influenza, lots of things. COVID is also going to live with us, or we are going to live with COVID. So the immediate, after this immediate thirst, it may take about a year or so, or whatever period, we'll come back to our traditional method of teaching. Plus, now we will have the advantage of having the electronic medium of teaching as well. And our exams can also be electronic. A number of institutes in this year have had their even practicals on electronic platforms by Skype or by other means. And these things are going to happen in the future also. As far as even in my own institute, what we have done was that we'll have the question paper circulated half an hour. Because we share a different position. We said our theory question paper will circulate half an hour earlier electronically, and then the institute can print it and distribute it. And as far as the practical is concerned, we can have examiners from different reputed institutes, and they'll join us on basically on these electronic mediums and do teleconferencing. So the electronic method of teaching, we have realized, is a good method of teaching to a certain extent. I don't think it should be the only method of teaching, because we do need our teaching is not like history or geography. Our teaching is practical oriented, problem oriented. We need patients. We need to have the feel of the patients and all those things. So we'll go back to that sort of a teaching regularly. But yes, it can be supplemented with electronic teachings as well, with electronic sessions also. And we have had the opportunity on behalf of the government to train about 36,000 NCC cadets for COVID. So electronically, then we had taught medical veterinary officers, because if we fall short of medical doctors, we'll call them for medical duty to assist us also. They are already into it. They are already dealing with viral diseases like bird flu and things like that. We have taught about 600 teachers of higher secondary, because when we take schools for quarantine, they should know what are the measures to be taken, how to be leaders for that quarantine. So electronic way is going to stay, and it is a good medium to reach. We can, even in my institute, I suggested that KGMC has started electronic teaching to undergraduates. So I requested the dean and the vice chancellor that why not we extend this electronic teaching to other medical colleges which are affiliated with KGMC, because what we are looking forward is to upbring the level of teaching everywhere. So maybe most of the institutes which are affiliated may be doing their own teaching, but still we said, we have some good teachers, and students would like to listen to those good teachers and interact with them. So electronic teaching is also going to stay. And since I believe COVID is not going to be a permanent, in this way as it is today, so classroom teaching will also come back after a certain period of time.
Thank you, sir. So basically, you are emphasizing on the point that there should be a balance between the online teaching as well as the traditional way of teaching.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank
Definitely.
you, sir. We hope that the COVID scenario ends soon so that things can get back to normal.
Yeah.
With this, let's move on to the next one, sir. Do you believe the university should be more student oriented? Also, should feedback be taken from students and faculty about the actions of the university?
I think so. Definitely so. Because ultimately, in a corporate world or in any other world, the person who's the customer, you might call it, he is the person who's the supreme. So he should be inclusive as far as the program is concerned, some modifications, some suggestions, and I would always welcome all constructive criticisms as far as the functioning of the university is concerned. It should be student friendly. There should be a system where the students can also secretly maybe evaluate their teachers without embarrassing them. They can give a feedback of the teachers. We do have systems in our place, where in the earlier days we had good teachers and not so good teachers. How did it happen? That happened by the word of mouth. We still remember these teachers were very good at our place when we were being taught in every institution. And similarly, there were some teachers whom we felt, but that feeling was not, communicated to the person concerned or the faculty concerned, so that he also, if willing, can contribute or improve himself or herself. Because the teacher has a very important role as far the university or the teaching is concerned.
Thank you, sir. That was very on point answer. And so moving on to the next one, sir. Since now a single medical university has finally been established, what are the immediate goals that you have in mind for the UP medical colleges?
Well, my immediate goal is to, number one, besides physical affiliation of the colleges, which is mandatory, only then you can fulfill your goal, is to have upliftment in the teaching patterns and the evaluation pattern. Both are linked. If the evaluation pattern is honest, transparent, and of a certain level, then of course there is an incentive for the student to be up to that level. If there is no goal for the student, then of course perhaps if they say the examinations are lax, then the student, most of the students I would say, do not have an incentive to read that much. So to have some proper standards as far as the evaluation is concerned, and of course the teachings, and not only teachings which are at the end of the examination period, but also teachings which do happen and in between. Like for instance, I don't know whether I'll be able to do it because it would be later on. Say, suppose you take a midterm test for the students, and it's very easy with the electronic system now. You ask the students, you give them questions and put them on a Google form and say, okay, answer these questions. So the student comes to evaluate himself, and you also know how the students are placed. So things like that, where the student can directly also communicate with the university besides its own college. And when you go for these selection exams, or you're doing coaching for those selection exams, what do they do? They do mock tests where the student comes to know about his ranking as far as the say the country is concerned, or the people who have joined that institute is concerned. Where is he placed, and he can evaluate himself. Similarly, such things can be done by the university itself, so that the students can evaluate themselves be prepared for them, and do it in a modular fashion, that you give them topics. Okay, this is the topic for this month, this is the topic for this month, and something like that, but coming back to your point, the aim would be to maintain the standards of the university, and maintain the standards that people in the country have reliability, that okay, if this university has given a degree, then it means the student has to be up to this level. That is something like an ISI mark for the student, that he is at least up to this level. And that is why I know the challenges of doing it are also many, but the thing is that if you don't work in that direction, then I think from day one you're compromising with the quality.
All right, thank you, sir. I see a few questions in the comment section as well.
Yes.
So I would like to inform the listeners that we'll take those questions in the end if we still have some time, because we have shortlisted a few of the most important ones. So if we still have some time at the end, we'll surely take up those questions. With this, let's move ahead to the next one. Since we had different universities...
I'll be brief in my answers. Sorry, I said I'll try to be brief in my answers, so that we can entertain the questions.
All right, so moving ahead, since we had different universities for different colleges till now, students faced multiple problems, one of which is the exams were conducted at drastically different times. So will the university make a single examination schedule for the students?
Yeah, definitely. That is one of the prime duties of the university, to have a uniform examination system and a simultaneous examination for all affiliated medical colleges at the same time. Why I revert back sometimes to my own experiences, even while working in KGMU, as controller of examinations, I have had a uniform syllabus, a uniform examination pattern. And not only that, the examination dates were declared much in advance. Like in September, October, we used to have the academic calendar for the next year. And this I have been having it for the last 6-7 years. And COVID has made things go helter and skelter. But bearing maybe 1 or 2 exceptions in those 2 years because of some very grave problem, that schedule has been adhered to. So the examinations have to be in time. The result declaration has to be in time. Everything has to be conforming to a pre-decided schedule.
Thank you, sir. Well, the delay in examinations creates a lot of stress amongst the students, and hopefully the university will take care of it. So there's also a subpart to this question regarding the supply exams. How will that be scheduled, and how helpful do you think will it be for the students?
Well, the guidelines for supplementary exam have already been laid by the Medical Council of India, that it has to be within a span of maybe between 3 months to 4 months. That is the time which is some time frame has been already given by the MCI. So the examination will be scheduled accordingly. As I said, our examination calendar for the next year, in the regular as well as the supply, is put on the web, circulated much in advance, so that the student knows when the supply examinations are going to be held.
All right, thank you,
so
sir.
Same would be followed. Yeah.
So moving on to the next one. Well, this is another interesting one. Even I had this on my mind. The students of private institutions are compelled to pay a hefty amount in the name of examination fees. So how will this be regulated under this university?
Well, as far as the fees is concerned, I think by maintaining a transparency that this is the examination fees, and what I personally believe is that the examination fees should be same for all colleges. It's a round robin sort of a situation. What happens is at many places, because the fees for the private medical colleges which they charge is much higher than what the government medical colleges the students charge, or the colleges charge. So what many universities do is they have a differential fee system for the government colleges and for the private medical colleges. Then the private college says, I have to pay in more fees, therefore I'm charging you more fees. So I think that should stop, and there should be a uniform fee pattern for both the private and the medical colleges. Having said that, not now I am not very much into the intricacies of it, but I believe that should be possible to have a common fee system, so everybody knows what is the examination fees, and if something extra is being charged, they know that it is the private vendor or the private medical college in the name of examination fees is charging the students.
Thank you, sir. Being from a private institution, I myself understand what the extra burden it puts apart from the hefty amount we pay in the name of tuition fees. So hopefully that will be taken care. So moving on to the next one, sir. Uttar Pradesh medical UGs lack in UG research. In all other states, students are primed right from the first year to be research oriented. What is your view on that? And will you take UG research and a research supporting environment?
Yeah, I think so. That is an essential part. It should be followed. Even in all Institute of Medical Sciences, the student gets some sort of an intramural funding for that, so that it's not a heavy amount, but and it's not a very breathtaking, I would say, research. But the aim of this research is to inculcate an habit to objectively think, to write a structured something, design a structured study. That is the basic premise why a student should be encouraged. And I think we'll be in a position to, if the college does not have intramural funding and we have the finances, we will put in some sorts of intramural funding so that the students can do some sort of a research. I do agree that all students don't have to do research future in their life, because most of the students are going into the healthcare sector and they wouldn't be doing, but to have an orientation and to have an aptitude that some of them go into research later on as a faculty member or pure researchers, they should be introduced to some sort of a research methodology and a practical research experience in their early formative years.
Right. Thank you, sir. That was a wonderful answer. So moving ahead, how important is a good work culture in colleges? Medical colleges have a very toxic oppression system. Students are scared to bring up genuine issues. Will you be taking steps to promote a happier work and study environment in medical colleges?
I don't know about the toxic, well, yes, teachers should be like elder guides and friends. They shouldn't be somebody on whom, the students should be scared of. They should respect them. That is something different. And respect means not, respect under duress. Respect means you respect somebody for his knowledge, for his acumen, for his behavior, for his attitude in life. That is what I think actual respect is. It is not a respect, where you are in a commanding position and say, okay, I am the examiner and I can see you, or the student is scared of that. So that should not be the approach. It should be a more friendly approach where the students can feel free. So the teachers also should have an attitude that if somebody is politely pointing out to something, they should be receptive. And I know it's a difficult thing to do than to say or to preach, because a lot of ego issues come into being, but that is the way it should be. And the development also happens that way. The West has developed where the student and the teacher, they have a relationship where there they call this teacher also by the first name. You go to USA, he'll say, hey, Tom, this is my problem. And the Tom also does not feel bad about it that he's calling me Tom, instead of saying sir or Guruji or something like that. But yes, he's never disrespectful. He cannot be disrespectful. He'll sit him in the class. He'll sit with him in the discussion room, and as co-human beings, they'll discuss into it. The other thing which I have often quoted is, don't take students or even postgraduates. We have most of the postgraduates as as something who are going to be servile. Ultimately, they are going to be your colleagues. So treat them in a way that they are your future colleagues.
Thank you, sir. A teacher-student relationship should be good. Only then they'll be able to grasp the knowledge from the teachers. So yes, that's an important point. So moving ahead, so there is a question regarding the stipend of the colleges in UP. We see that the private colleges have a fairly low amount of stipend compared to the other universities, and the amount of workload is so huge amongst the interns. So what will the university do about it?
Well, we have, different states have different parameters as far as the stipend is concerned. So the amount of stipend given in each state by the government college is also not uniform. They have very varied, Delhi perhaps tops the list, and many colleges, especially Maharashtra, is known to give, poorer stipends to its resident doctors. Uh, we'll have to, DNB, Diplomat National Board, has fixed the stipend at a definite ceiling that you cannot give less than this stipend to any of your resident. And only then, if these things are met, only then the affiliation is taken through. I know of my colleagues who have done DNB inspections also. They privately call the resident and ask him, what is the stipend which is available to you? What is it giving? And they have acted on it, where in the DNB said, okay, if you are not going to pull up your socks for that, we are going to discontinue with it. So something of that sort will also have to be done with the affiliated colleges.
All right, thank you, sir. So
Well, I have
moving
said
on
a
to the
lot of
next one.
things, people would not like to get affiliation from, from this university.
Sir, not
You
at
get my
all. We
point?
are very,
I've said so many things
sir,
against private. No, the
sir, not
private
at all.
medical
We
college
are
may say, okay, I'm not going to join the university.
no, sir. We are very pleased to join the university as it will ultimately benefit the medical education in UP. And so, moving ahead, some universities conducted the traditional essay type exams, while some like KGMU have started asking MCQs, which helps the student to prepare for both professionals as well as PG entrance. What kind of examination in today's time?
Well, given a choice, the MCI comes up with the regulations from time to time. The MCI says that you can have up to 25% of questions in the form of an MCQ or short essay type of questions. So we have to abide with the guidelines of the MCI, because if you don't abide with the guidelines, not only the MCI, but these things have a legal implications also. So keeping into that, what my personal feeling is that all types of questions do have an importance. You have an importance of an essay type of question also. You have an importance of short questions, and you have an importance of MCQs as well. Going everything on MCQ, I think it is an approach which is, we had a system in KGMU where they said, it was said that one paper MCQ this year, two papers MCQ next year, three papers MCQ the next year, and ultimately all papers MCQ. My thing is, MCQs are also not an answer to for good medical education. A good teacher or a good student should be able to express himself also, should be able to draw diagrams also where need be. So a balance between MCQ and the theory type of questions, I think that would be my priority in very clear terms as far as these examinations are concerned. MCQs are also important because the further, but what happens in actual scenario, and this happens with lots of people, is if you tell them this examination is going to be MCQ based, they leave the textbooks apart and they start mugging down, I would say, MCQs. And the way they mug down MCQs is you ask them two lines, the two first sentences of the question, they'll tell you the answer without going into the. So they have virtually crammed up the MCQs rather than understanding. So what I tell the students is, don't go for MCQ books. Go for your regular teaching books. Whatever questions are going to come, it is going to come from your text. And the students read their textbooks also. I think it's important to have questions which are based on theory as well. So a mix of both is, I feel, is a better thing.
Thank you,
MCQs
sir.
can be done as practice. Yeah.
All right. So the next question is, should a standard teaching protocol be established one focusing maximum on conceptual learning and not teaching in a less intuitive manner?
I think yes. Conceptual learning is something which stays with you for long, and the emphasis should be on creating concepts rather than on mugging up things and trying to vomit it out in the examination. Conceptual learning is always better, and the only thing about conceptual learning is the teachers have to make the student understand the subject. It should not be just go and do a lecture and come back. Like the big problem with these webinars or these online teaching courses is that it is a very passive sort of a learning. It is not interactive. The teachers stand in front and his PowerPoint presentation goes through to the students, and he says the student may be interested, may not be interested. I would say it is something like watching a movie or watching a theater, where in a theater you see the action going on. In a movie you are doing all your work also, and in between watching the movie. So to a certain extent, interactive learning is a better method of learning. I still feel that the traditional blackboard system of learning is a good method of learning. It could be replicated by, or it could be substituted by, instead of a blackboard, it could be a whiteboard, it could be an electronic board. And it should be supplemented with the visuals where you want to show. Suppose you want to show a step of an operation. So that can be supplemented with some sort of video. If you want to show, say, the relationships of some structures, you can have a 3D video where you can show the relationships. I think conceptual learning is something which imprints in your mind, and a good teacher is one who does not go very much into detail, but tries to give the students the concepts of that talk. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir. So then, your outlook regarding the future pathways of KGMU and the Atal Bihari Vajpayee University. Should KGMU be raised to full AIM status now that it doesn't have to act as the affiliating university?
Well, at the outset, I thanked KGMU for allowing me to continue with this. So KGMU can always feel pride in it that that Atal Bihari University started from KGMU, from the presence of KGMU. My one word answer would be a symbiosis between the institutes. We are not competitors. No university, in fact, is a competitor to each other. We are people who are in symbiosis, and we want that each institute should grow up, and ultimately the medical standards of our state and the country, they improve. So that is what I feel about it. And as far as we did try at one point of time, not an AIMS like institute, but something not upgrading into AIMS, but institute of national importance, what we call it as INI. So we did try that. KGMU should come on to that stage and be one of the institutes of national importance, which is virtually equivalent to AIMS, because it gets more central funding also, and it gets recognition also. Well, at that point of time, we missed it by a flicker, because it reached up to the final level, but at the final level, we couldn't succeed. But yes, KGMU has the potential, and working steadfastly on it, I think it should be upgraded into AIMS like institute or institute of national importance.
There's a subpart to this question which says, please also comment on whether Atal University act as accrediting body for fellowships in colleges such as LLRM, GSVM, etc.
Yeah, certainly. One of the purposes of the university is to start courses, and being an university, it is an advantage that those courses may not be accredited or may not be in the purview of the Medical Council of India, but we do need to start fellowship courses, and these fellowship courses are very important, I would say, very important in the present context, because where people get a hands-on training for themselves, and also act as a dedicated manpower for that sort of a fellowship or a specialty. So fellowships are very important. I would agree to it. In KGMU, we have also started about, say, 20 in the last 2-3 years, about 20 or 23 fellowship courses, though they are not accredited by anybody else. But at least the students who participate into it, those students get a value addition as far as this work is concerned. Their employability increases because they have dedicatedly worked into that. Like, say a PDCC in anesthesia in critical care is something which a lot of institutes look forward to, and many other fellowships in, say, let me talk about myself in hand and microsurgery, then fellowships in, say, interventional cardiology, where the students during their MT days or DM days, they get a limited exposure to it. But as a fellow, after having gained their degree, they get a lots of hands-on experience. It helps both them as well as the institution. So fellowships courses are a must, and would be welcoming those fellowship courses. And of course, it has to be once again accredited. Accredited means we have to, not that every Tom, Dick and Harry is asking for a fellowship, but yes, the ability to sustain that fellowship should be in that institute where it is approved.
All right, thank you, sir. So now we are moving towards the end of the question, end of this session, and we have a couple of questions left.
Sure.
The next one is, a number of colleges, especially the new ones, don't have enough faculties. Just as important it is to maintain the examination standard at par, how can the education quality be standardized to ensure that there's no disparity amongst the colleges?
A very valid question in the present scenario, and it is going to take some time before this happens. And let me give you my brief insight into that. We are going to face this shortage of faculty for a pretty long time, because in the NEETs, who becomes a faculty? A person who has completed his MD, MS or DMMCH, he becomes a faculty in his specialty. Now, the present system which is there is, we have students coming through NEET. Some of those students come from some state services also, right? Those people who come from state services, they have their obligation to serve in the state. So those people, even if they have done their MD, they are not eligible as teachers, because they have a bond, they have to work in their own state. So those people are already out of question, and they may be something around, maybe say on a conservative estimate, they could be about, say, 20% or so students. So the shortage of faculty is still going to be there. One of the solutions which we already discussed is that helping those students or those colleges by the help of these sorts of these sorts of teaching aids, the modern teaching aids, so that they can log into it, they can do assessments of the students there, and at least help those students who are willing to be helped. So those students should not feel handicapped that they have joined an ex-medical college where there is hardly any faculty. I'm sorry, I go back and relate to the history. As control of examination, there was a college, a government medical college, where there was no gynae teacher. Come to think of it, MBBS curriculum going on and no gynae teacher. We had to send internal examiners from KGMU. Then how to do practical? There were no gynae patients. So we requested the district hospital that to send us some patients. The students have not even seen those 10 deliveries which happen, which they are supposed to observe during the course curriculum. So it was a piquant situation. So not having faculty does have problems. Government is working way around it. They have tried, they are extending the age of retirement. They are trying to have contractual teachers just for all these purposes, that the problem of faculty is minimized. This problem of faculty is not only in medical colleges. This problem is even in AIIMS-like institutions, or AIIMS, many of them. They are even short with about 20 to 30% of faculty, even in AIIMS, where they have the stability of job, they have a good reputation of an AIIMS, they have a better pay scale and salary structure and all. Even they are feeling the pinch of it. So it is a real problem which is going to happen. And I think the way out is the MCI should enforce that the stringent faculty parameters should be maintained before giving recognition to those colleges. That could minimize the problems, and we on the part of the university can help those colleges who are already running to provide electronic sort of a teaching, so that at least students can be aware of. Then we can have even exchange programs where they can come to these institutions, but that is may not be a very practical issue, because one or two colleges you can do that, but with a large number of colleges which are having a faculty deficit, this may be a real challenge.
All right, thank you, sir. So we have now come to almost the end of the session, and we can wrap it up. Before that, sir, we can take a couple of questions from the comment section as well. I can see a lot of questions there. So I think Shashwat will coordinate from here. Shashwat will take over. Shashwat, can you hear me?
Hello, sir. Sir, my question was regarding the exchange program only, but I think that you have answered.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So I think we'll wind it up here, sir. Before that, there's one last question, which I think which will be the most important one. So since you have seen it all very clearly and very closely for so many years now, so what message would you like to give to this generation of young doctors and medicos?
Well, we should have, what I see, will be having 2-3 types of doctors in the future. One would be a doctors who would be, say, the health providers of the society, and they play a very important role, and that also happens in the United Kingdom. You call as GPs. They are the band masters, I would call it, because they direct the health and they tell the patient where to go, where not to go. So for those doctors, is that the ABC is very important, and that ABC is availability, behavior, and competence is very important. All these three, and in that order, is very important, and that is also the mantra for a good private practice, also for a good successful practitioner also. Unfortunately, or whatever it is, availability is number 1, behavior is number 2, and competence is number 3. You don't have to be, as you say, a rocket scientist to diagnose all diseases. But yes, if you can diagnose 80%, 90% of diseases, and you can give them, and those who are not curable, you refer them, or you're not manageable at your end, I would say, then you go send them to a specialist. So one of the aims people should pursue is that they should be good doctors, and good doctors means, the B part is also very important. The behavior part is also very important. My message to doctors is, let people call you God, but you don't start feeling that you are God. You may take it as a humble servant of the God. That is fine, but let that God feeling not go into your head. That is what my is, because then you remain to the ground realities, and you're not very elated if somebody comes and cries before you, or somebody touches your feet or something like that. Yes, he's grateful, you should be thankful for it, but that feeling that, okay, I am the Brahma, something like that, very huge feeling that I have given him life, that should not be there. Number 1. Number 2 is, have pride in your profession. If I am a doctor, I am proud to be doctor. Proud is something which is different from ghamand. Ghamand is something which is a negative part of it. That should not be there. But yes, my profession is not a lowly profession. My profession is a dignified profession. And if I behave in a dignified way, people are bound to listen to you and respect you for however powerful they may be. Somebody commented, some very great politician, I'm forgetting his name, commented when they were comparing actors with doctors. They said actors, I'm forgetting it, but they said, doctors are worshipped for their work. You are praised for your glamour part of it. So he compared doctors. He said, doctors have a better, and this came from a very senior politician in Delhi. I forget, quite some time back. But what he said is, doctors are worshipped. Ours is a profession of conquering the other person. Our profession is not a profession of power. It is not like a, a bureaucratic profession that where the person's file moves under you, or somebody has got the danda in his hand, like the police or something like that. So our profession is a profession of conquering, and you should be able to conquer the heart of the other person. And when I say other person, it means the patient who is before you. Well, these things do happen, and this short of time, otherwise I could have shared a story which happened just a few days back when I was visiting the the principal secretary to the chief minister. Somebody came running to me, "Sir, you didn't recognize me?" I said, "No." I said, "No, I'm sorry." He said, my name is this, and you treated my son." I said, "I recollected, because it was a patient who had a malignancy of the upper end of the humerus. We did a reconstruction. Somebody did an excision, our colleague. We did a reconstruction where we took the fibula and recreated the humerus. That patient had a recurrence. After that recurrence, had multiple sinuses, lot of treatment given to him. Ultimately, the child died. I remembered it very vividly. But see the greatness. His child died. Even then, he came running and said, "I'm still grateful to you." That is what we should be. It is not just I'm saying it because it happened with me. It happens with lots of doctors. It does. But we would like to be happy to see most of the doctors, the patients come to you and say, even if they have had a loss in the family, your treatment has not been successful. Even then, they come to you and they are grateful to you. That is the sort of respect which we seek. And what is my advice to my younger generation is, to younger friends, is that go for that. Lot of people will give you advice that don't run after money and things like that. I do agree to a certain extent that we should not be seen in that light. Money would always follow, and we all get enough money. All means most of it gets enough money to pursue our course, and there is no upper limit to money. Even Tata Birla asks for, keep on asking for money. We do need money. Okay, that's in short. Couldn't help narrating that episode, so that it may help others, the younger generation, that this is the sort of pleasure we seek in our profession.
Definitely, sir. Thank you for that wonderful message. And we believe that the patient's gratitude is the best award that we can have being in this profession. And hopefully our listeners will follow that ABC formula that you gave. And thank you so much for your answer, sir. I hope most of the doubts have been answered, and our listeners will take inspiration from you and will soon groom into the great, excellent doctors, great leaders,
Please
and work
answer,
for the medical fraternity and
sir, please
society as well.
answer our query.
So you can put it in the comment section. We can deal with it.
Yeah, if you can, I can even offer to reply to them on email if that's not a problem, technically a problem. I don't mind, giving them individual replies. If I can quote my email address, and if the people want to correspond, they're most welcome to do so. Should I? My email address is singhkarun@hotmail.com. singhkarun@hotmail.com. I don't want to disappoint, people who want to ask something, but if they send me an email on this, I'll be happy to answer to them.
Thank you so much, sir.
It is
Yeah.
singhkarun@hotmail.com. The reverse of Arun
Thank you
K.
so much,
Singh.
sir.
Yeah.
So we are highly obliged to you for this, and it is an honor that a great personality like you is offering the email ID for personally answering those questions. But I still believe that we have answered most of the important ones. And so finally, we are winding it up, sir. Again, it's an honor to have you with us.
Thank you.
Uh, we again thank you for your valuable time and patience. We firmly believe that under your guidance and leadership, the medical education in Uttar Pradesh will soar on great heights. So with this, we are ending this episode now. I see a lot of thank you messages in the comment section as well. And
thank you. Thanks a lot.
I would like to, thank you, sir. So I would like to express my vote of thanks to Dr. Rajneesh Raj, sir, the President, IMA MSN UP, Dr. Rahul Anand sir, the General Secretary, IMA MSN UP, Tarun Sharma sir, National Council Member, IMA MSN UP, and the entire IMA MSN UP team. Also, the coordinators for this event, Harshit Chauhan, Harsh Srivastav, and Shashwat Singh. Thank you so much for organizing this event. Thank you, sir, and thanks to the audience. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you. Bye.